What's Possible? Next Level Thinking with World-Class Coaches. I am thrilled to be joined by three of my colleagues from Silicon Valley Change. We have Shannon Polly joining, and Shannon is often requested to help people with executive presence. While she has many different tools in her toolbox, that's one area that we get regular requests for. Brian Brannigan is also joining us, and one of Brian's many specialties is team communication, and he does quite a bit of work on effective listening. And then last but never least is Alex. And Alex is one of those people who has a ton of wise words. However, what you'll sometimes find is because he is a quiet leader himself and a little introverted, sometimes he will listen and then hit you with a powerful something when you least expect it. And Alex is often brought in to work with our leaders on quiet leadership. So welcome all of you.
No pressure, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to be expecting that by the end of the webinar.
Okay. Thank you.
Get ready for that winner. We'll close out with you. Okay. So today, the reason that I brought us all here is we have had so many conversations behind the scenes on quiet quitting. And it's hard to pull up your LinkedIn feed and not see some article or something around this topic. And so I thought, since we are in the trenches, we're working day in and day out on leadership development, we're working with organizations, why not tap this pool of our colleagues and see what we might be able to share, shed light on, and any thoughts we have. I always like to start with the definition, though, just so that we can get clear on what we're talking about. So who of you might want to share your thoughts on what quiet quitting means?
I'll jump in, and I'm going to admit that I'm borrowing this from a brilliant Atlantic article and a woman named Amelia Nagoski, who wrote a book about burnout. So I think it's interesting to note the distinction between them. She said, quiet quitting is both for the prevention of burnout and recovery from burnout. But it's where you are at work and you are not doing as much as is expected of you. You're just doing the bare minimum. So I thought that was a particularly cogent definition.
Wow.
Alex is not buying it. You don't buy that definition?
No, it's not that I'm not buying it. I tend to agree with it. But I think I would add to that. It's something that I call checking out, which I think has been around a lot longer than the actual term quiet quitting has been. And I think it usually comes from a lack of engagement. And so basically what we start doing now, we start applying discretionary effort. And to Shannon's point, I also think it can be from two different sources, fueled by two different forces, so externally and internally. Mm-hmm. So where externally would be the workplace, unsatisfying jobs or toxic environments. But internally, it's more to Shannon's point, when there's a certain level of self-awareness, and now you realize you shift your priorities and work is no longer like the end all that be all, or the other way around, be all that end all. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I kind of consider quiet quitting to be staying in your lane. This is what my job is. Yeah. This is what I signed on when, and agreed to do when I joined the team. And quietly over time, I volunteered extra hours or extra effort, which somehow got baselined into what is now expected. So it's, to me, it's in these very confusing times where employees are trying to figure out for themselves how to manage their life and their work and the relationship with their coworkers and with the team mission. They're just returning to their baseline okay, I'm going to go back and stay in my lane, and then as it makes sense, begin to apply discretionary effort discretionary effort.
What I'm hearing in that, Brian, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's really the employee creating boundaries, setting clear boundaries that were potentially there to begin with, but have kind of gotten loose over time as people have, project creep and stepping back and resetting boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even necessarily declaring boundaries, because if we're living in a hybrid world where so much of the work is now being done by Zoom, where's the opportunity to say, hey, time out, let's have a conversation about, project expectations. So they're just doing it quietly because there isn't the opportunity to actually declare, hey, can we revisit the team mission and how much effort it's taking to do it?
Interesting. Yeah. What I'm hearing, go ahead, Shannon.
I was just going to say that I think that the distinction perhaps, and the reason why it's gotten so much traction, and while there's similarity to checking out, is because of the pandemic, is because of people had this actual chance to pause and chance to reevaluate. It's like when you go away on a vacation and then people come back and they quit because they were like, wait a minute, my priorities shifted. I think it's also because in the pandemic, over 1 million people died. And I think a lot of clients I'm seeing are reevaluating their priorities and deciding, as Alex said, what's actually important to me, and is work the be all and end all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and related to that is like when you have a workplace, where there's cafeterias and concierge services that allow people to work a little extra longer, then it's easier to do the discretionary extra effort. But then when you send some people suddenly home, people have to cook their own meals, do their own laundry, and guess what? That takes time too. And I'm reminded of the something someone had said about describing, during the .com boom and later, how work became home and home became work. Mm-hmm. And so people during the pandemic had to realize, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff I have to take care of in my life as well, and they're doing that. They're attending to it.
So I would just want to throw in something, just because I like to be throwing things. So right now we're discussing quiet quitting as, like you said, as something that we do intentionally as a tool. What about quiet quitting as a form of self-preservation and protecting? So, for instance, I am in a situation that I do not like. It's a bad work environment. It's toxic, but I need this job, and so, but I really don't feel any passion for it. I really don't want to do this, but I don't really have a choice. So, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure that I do the bare minimum to make sure that I don't lose this. But I'm really not feeling this. This is not really what I want. But until something else better can be done.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Gallup showed that maybe 50% of workers now qualify as quiet quitting, and that women and people of color are more likely to be stuck in that position, even though there are more jobs available. There are, people who have to put food on the table. So, I think it's definitely a survival mechanism.
Thanks for bringing up that Gallup article. Because one thing they're pointing out as well in that is that quiet quitting isn't just an engagement issue for employees, but it's also how engaged is management in understanding the issues in their team. Yeah. So it's quiet quitting is also a symptom of poor management, as that Gallup survey report mentions.
Yeah.
And I do have a question around that. You think about the managers, what they've been asked to do over the last 2 years. Everybody is spread so thin, so taxed, so overworked. We have a lot of organizations. We had the Great Resignation, then now we have layoffs. And with both of those, you have people who are staying, are absorbing more and more work, whether there's the quitting or the layoffs. Those who are still there are doing more work. And so you're trying to manage, you're trying to engage your employees. There's a lot being asked of everybody. And I'm curious, what as managers, and we do a lot of coaching of, senior leaders in organizations, what are some things that they might be able to do to either offset this, to support? I know there's kind of the other side of quiet quitting, the silent firing that's happening from organizations. What can our senior leaders do to help minimize or make this better?
That's a great question. I'm gonna start with an example of an organization that I'm working with that is actually trying to implement a culture change. And they've used Microsoft as an example. They're implementing the change, and it's basically going from the work to more about the people. They're weaving in psychological flexibility as a key leadership factor for their managers and their manager training. They are incorporating well-being, which is very unique for this large international organization to weave in as well. And they know it's going to be difficult to try to move the needle, but they're working at getting the buy-in from the top level first, as well as implementing manager training programs, as well as implementing coaches and giving more people coaching. So I think that there's some structural things that hopefully, if people are at a certain level, they can push for. Because I think it can't just be, oh well, I know things are hard. Here's a coach. Here's a wellness program. I mean, there are lots of things that we coaches can do, and there are some structural issues, I think, that are causing this phenomenon.
Really good points. Can you, before we carry on with that, I love the thread that you've just started. Can you define psychological flexibility for our listeners?
Well, it's psychological safety, and
I thought you said flexibility. Sorry,
No, that's okay. Maybe I did say that. It's entirely possible.
So then let's go with psychological safety. And it's funny, I just interviewed another one of our coaches, Sharon, on the whole topic of psychological safety.
Oh, great.
I still love defining terms. So will you define it for the people who are listening today?
Sure. So it depends on which scholar you look at. This particular organization likes Tim Clark's model of psychological safety, which is 4 stages. The first stage is inclusion safety, meaning that you meet that basic human need to connect and belong. You're part of the group, which some of our leaders, or at least mine, are having challenges doing virtually. 2 is learner safety, that you're allowed to learn and grow. So that growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work. Stage 3 is contributor safety. So you feel like you can make a difference. You can leverage your strengths and contribute. And stage 4 is challenger safety. And that is, are you allowed to speak up and make things better?
Wow. And just hearing you speak, I'm sure Alex and Brian too, when you think of these 4 elements, if those were happening, I wonder what that would do. Right?
Yeah.
That would be an issue.
Yeah. And to answer your question, Eileen, one of the other things that I really liked in the workplace issue from Gallup was the point that managers must learn how to have conversations to help reduce disengagement and burnout with their employees. Because so only managers are in the position, because they're in the team meetings, they're in the one-on-ones to know what's happening with the individual contributors, both their life situations, their strengths and goals. And I was recently on an engagement with another organization where they too were looking at entering a new market and scaling. And as part of that, they were working with something called the cycle of commitment, which was there was a Harvard Business Review article written by Donald Sull a while back on managing promises. So what they did in this company was just to make really sure that you were really explicit about the requests you were making of each other. And you didn't assume a yes. And that's, I think, one of the things that is the quiet quitting is basically people are not saying no.
Sure.
Because they're afraid to say no. But if a manager is making a request, in the cycle of commitment methodology, there are really only 4 committed responses to a request. Of course, yes. I'll get back to you on this date with an answer. That's a commit to commit. There's a counter offer. When you ask for this, okay, I can supply this instead. Or like I can get to that, and I'll get to it later. And then the 4th one is no. And anybody who makes a request has to be ready to hear no, and that has an acceptable response. And then that just becomes the beginning of the next stage of negotiation. Like, okay, what can you do? But again, the problem we have is with email and things like that is that it's asynchronous and there's no opportunity to have that direct conversation. So I think one way to solve quiet quitting is more conversations. But what do you expect? That's my
We're a little biased there.
Yeah, that's my hammer. Yeah.
And then we'll say we'll be happy to have Brian
swing
your hammer
on how to have those conversations. I think to your point, Brian, it's a matter of knowing how to say no. So when we don't know how to say no, we go silent and we do this silent quitting. And if we know how to say no, or how can or being able to ask for help and being able to have healthy conversations and dialogue, it might allow us to show up differently on both sides.
Yeah. Well, and if something is really important to you and you want it done, ask the person. Don't just send it in an email and assume that it's been read and understood.
Alex, I feel like you were maybe going to chime in on something at some point a moment ago.
Well, so you were asking what can organizations or leaders do? I'd like to take it a step further back.
Yeah.
Because I think most people, when we talk about quiet quitting, person that pops into mind as well, like I said, people are leaving for greener pastures or because for whatever reason. But I think what we need to also take into consideration that it's because of the intersectionality between D&I, communication, we talked about that, leadership, because people, and speaking as quiet leaders, you're already in a situation where it takes a lot of energy and time, working against, like unnecessary headwinds, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so what happens, there's like, well, it's not going to make a difference anyway. So why am I even bothering? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to voice that opinion. So like you said, I want to say no, but nobody says no. Funny, I was watching a series the other day on television, and it was this particular lady who tried to warn authorities about something, and they were not heard. Right, and I remember thinking about that. It's like, this is something that is still prevalent today. People are trying to voice an opinion, but they're not being heard, and so again, you get this frustration of why am I even bothering? You know what? To point out what Brian said earlier, I'm gonna just say my name. You figure it out. Another thing that I've seen, that I'm encountering a lot with some of my clients, is in a situation where there's a lot of transition happening, right? Because there's a lot of transition happening with organizations, acquisitions and there's changes and mergers, but there's a lack of transparency, right? So what's happening now? People are starting to get frustrated. Hey, nobody's telling me anything, but I'm still expected to manage this team, or I'm still expected to complete this project, but nobody's telling me anything. you know what, you figure it out, and I'll just sit here.
Yeah, interesting. So we've gone from the great resignation to quiet quitting to having the emotion of resignation.
Wow.
I love what you said, Alex, about transparency, that leaders, and that it gets back to that constant communication of what you know and what you don't know and what you can share and what you can't share. And people being willing, if they feel like you're being authentic with them, then they're less likely to disengage. And not to beat it, a horse that Silicon Valley Change beats a lot, but Gallup says that when you focus on employee strengths, they're only 1% likely to be disengaged. So it makes me wonder how, if we applied the strengths philosophy to quiet quitting, and even in the fact that there are all these challenges, if managers just shifted that lens and just focused on what's working, how resilient are people to have survived the last 2 years? Like, what kind of shift would that make?
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. You're absolutely right. When we focus on the strengths, again, what's possible in the spirit of what's possible. And I think the main reason I wanted us all to gather around this is my concern is nobody wins when there's quiet quitting. The organizations certainly don't win, and nor the individuals don't either. Even when it's self-preservation, as coaches, we'd rather you not be living in constant self-preservation. We'd love you to be living and working where you're thriving. So I think that's what got under my skin for the whole concept of quiet quitting. It can feel sometimes it can even feel empowering, possibly as an employee. And I have a family member who is in this. She's like, I'm kind of done. I'm doing the quiet quitting thing on this one. And in her organization, she has now left and is super engaged again. And that is my concern, is if we stay in a quiet quitting mode, it doesn't serve anybody. And so with that in mind, I'm going to invite the three of you to play 1, 2, 3 with me. So, and so I'll have just one of you, whoever chimes in first is the winner on that one. What's one mindset shift to open the door to possibility around this whole topic?
I'll jump in. I think the antidote to resignation is ambition. So cultivating a mood of ambition, for yourself and for the people you care about and the future that you want to live into.
Not the gross, like elbowing people out of the way ambition,
no.
Like hopeful ambition.
Yeah. And, heartful ambition.
Heartful ambition. Okay.
Yeah.
And having clarity around what you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the one where, you basically say, no, this is what I'm committed to, and this is what I need to get it.
Yeah. Love that. All right. So then let's have Shannon and Alex do 2 ideas or facts that you hope our listeners take away today.
One idea is, if we take a positive psychology view, how can you see this quiet quitting as information or as an opportunity for change? Usually when we're feeling discomfort or some other emotion, we want to shove it away. But what if we welcome it and say, wow, I'm really feeling disengaged right now. What does that mean for me?
Oh, yes. That's great. Alex, an idea or fact for our listener to take away?
Well, I think it has to do with perspectives. And, again, from psychology, we also talk about the things that we can control over the things that we can't. And there's a lot that we cannot control. But we do have some of control over is how we respond to a lot of these things. And a lot of this is because of the way we feel. So we feel undervalued, we feel disrespected, we feel, it can be supported by facts, but 9 times out of 10, it still comes down to how does this make us feel? And then I'm always reminded of, I think it was a Tony Robbins exercise. I don't know what the color was. I called it, I just stuck with blue. But it was an exercise that he made me do where I had to memorize everything in my immediate environment that was blue. And then I had to close my eyes and So I closed my eyes and he asked me to list all the yellow things. Of course, you couldn't because you were focusing on all the blue, and just to illustrate, what you focus on will grow. So it will just feed your malcontent. So if you keep on looking at that person, just start constantly picking on you or whatever, it will just keep on growing, and everything will just, confirmation bias will creep in, and everything will just literally line up to that. And before you know it, you're completely frustrated, you're irritable, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. Mm-hmm. So saying all of that is, again, not saying to just ignore, the science and the things that are bring, but you answered the question was, what can I do right away? Yeah. So then maybe the question is, what can I re-examine as to what is really an issue and what is just something that's just triggering?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's an issue and what's triggering? So Alex, you're going to get an option here because the next question is 3 actions they can apply to their life today. So you can use that if you want as your action, or you can think of another one. So I'll start with Shannon. I'll go to Brian and then you get to either say, repeat what you just said or give another nugget. So Shannon.
Okay. I would say that having some time to yourself, whether that's meditating or journaling or having a conversation with a coach or a friend, to create some space to ask the question, who am I if I'm not my job? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the people I coach feel fused with their job, and their self-worth is fused with their job. And then this causes a lot of the discontent with how they're experiencing it. Whereas if there was a little space of, well, I'm also a baker and I'm a singer and I'm a parent, and, all of those things that define me, how would that shift the way you perceived your experience right now?
Wow, that's good. Brian.
So my go-to tool in these situations would be to create a trust map. List all the people that are close to you, both at work and at home. And, for each person in each connection, choose a color that shows the level of trust you have with them, and really focus on building out your communication, first with the people that you have high trust with, and then, what do you need to turn the other levels to that level of high trust? So, and that's all done through the kinds of things you say yes to and the things you say I'll get to, how you manage your promises with them.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I've never heard of the trust map. One follow-up question for you on that. I hear you say, for those who possibly you don't have as strong a trust as for others, what do you want to do to create that?
Yeah.
Sometimes possible you don't want to have that trusting relationship too. You might not want to double down to make it better. It's like, I just want to be aware of that and I'm okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's true too. But if they're going to come to you and ask you to do things, then you're going to have to.
True.
You can have informed trust.
Good point. I like it.
And wise trust.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. All right, Alex, are you going to share another nugget with us for an action they can take away today?
Okay. So I think I'll just put a little tail on what I said before. I think part of the trick is to figure out when are you quitting, when it's time to quit the wrong thing, or when it is time to stay and fight for the right thing.
Yes.
And how do you do that? I think part of that is by examining or re-examining your values. And there's a really simple little trick that I picked up the other day by asking yourself a question. I mean, when it comes to priorities, so if I receive the needs that I have 6 months to live, how important is this? What's triggering me? Mm-hmm. Then I'll ask the same question, but no, not 6 months, but I have 6 weeks. And then I don't have 6 weeks, but I have 6 days. and I can go down all the way to 6 minutes if I need to. But and then so if this is worth quitting over or is it not, that's about as simple an exercise you can do, and then you'll know whether you want to stick around and fight for it or this is really not worth quitting over.
Yeah, that sure completely dials it into perspective right there.
Mm-hmm.
Gets you very clear on as I was on another call and with one of our fellow coaches, and he said, "What are you optimizing for?" And I think that question makes you really clear on what you're optimizing for in life.
Great question.
All right. So our very final thank you for all of those. I think our listeners are going to walk away with so many good things to really think about and hopefully start to shift the tide on this. I'm curious if one of you or more of you would like to just have a final thought on what's possible when we think about where we are and where we could be around quiet quitting.
I think it's great that we're having a dialogue about it. I think that if the pandemic were shorter, we might not have had this opportunity. It might have just flipped back into the way it was. But because it was so extended, people are learning that, wow, I can say no. Maybe all of these things that I thought were not options, this hamster wheel I'm on, there are choices here. So I think that it's great that we can continue out of the choices and continue to have people push back against you were so much more productive during COVID working at home. Let's bring you back to work and then keep up that 30% increase that I saw from you. So I think there's some self-assessment on what do I really want? What do people find purposeful and meaningful? And then having that conversation with their leadership as far as what the culture of work is going to look like.
Yeah. I think it's possible that we can have more engagement through deeper conversations with each other about not only that task, but the relationship that we're having, so that builds stronger bonds in teams.
You're very on message, Brian.
I know.
I
love it.
And yes, Brian does work with groups and leaders, USPC, on having powerful conversations.
I've seen it work.
Very on point. It's so true.
Yeah. Alex, can you give us one final just aha or thought to close?
No pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. The only thing that I think from an organizational standpoint, and I think I picked this up on a podcast with Brene Brown and Adam Grant and Simon Sinek, but I thought it was really interesting because so if you have a high performer in a leadership role, but who is, let's just say, a lower anatomical part as a person, creating a toxic environment, do you keep him or her at the expense of the people that are reporting to them or the workplace, or do you shift that, either address the situation of the person? And the other thing is, I think that organizations tend to start coaching, training leaders once they get into the role, as opposed to before they get into the role. And I think these two things may actually help getting rid of that sense of, people feeling undervalued or not heard or not being addressed, and all the D&I aspects of it. So yeah. And now I've used all my words for the day, really and truly.
I really appreciate that, because what you just said brings it right back to those 4 components of psychological safety that Shannon talked about. And it also weaves in what Brian talked about with ambition too, because as a leader, you can help your team with realizing their ambition and living up to that. So, wow. Thank you so much, the 3 of you. I think we'll have to have a part 2 because we could talk on and on about this topic. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.